Money changes people, but dead people's money? That makes them lose their absolute minds. Welcome to the ultimate family meltdown. Today, I am exposing 55 of the most absurd complaints about inheritances and wills ever filed. Forget peaceful grieving. We are talking about grown adults going to legal war over plastic bowls, haunted houses, and brilliant revenge from the grave. If you thought your relatives were toxic, these insane courtroom meltdowns will make you feel so much better. 1. Imagine finding out your father loved his golden retriever more than you. One furious son stormed out of a lawyer office when he realized the estate left $2 million to a pampered dog named Captain Barkles, while he inherited a rusty lawnmower and a single box of unresolved childhood trauma. The son actually tried to sue the dog for emotional distress. It did not work out. Would you contest a will if a literal canine became a millionaire instead of you? 2. A grandmother decided to micromanage her family from beyond the grave by tying a massive trust fund to their waistlines. Her will stated that her 3 granddaughters could only access their $500,000 shares if they maintained a healthy body mass index verified by an independent doctor every single January. One granddaughter furiously complained to the judge that this was fat-shaming from the afterlife. The judge ruled the deceased could be as petty as she wanted with her own cash. 3. A successful corporate lawyer was horrified to learn his father left him a massive commercial property with one deeply embarrassing stipulation. The son had to legally enroll in a certified clown college and perform at 3 kids' birthday parties. The son complained to his own law firm that his father was orchestrating career sabotage from the grave. He tried to hire an actor to do it, but the will demanded video proof. Would you put on a red nose and giant shoes for prime real estate? 4. Getting completely disinherited is harsh, but getting acknowledged just to be insulted is a masterpiece of spite. A wealthy real estate developer left his estranged daughter exactly one single dollar bill, along with a note specifying it was, so she could buy a cheap cup of coffee to wake up and realize she was a terrible person. She filed a highly emotional grievance with the probate court, arguing it was cruel and unusual punishment. The court essentially told her to enjoy the coffee. 5. There is honoring a final request, and then there is getting arrested for trespassing. A devoted widow was left a massive beachfront property on one condition. She had to illegally dump her husband's ashes in the middle of a specific high-end country club golf course during a major tournament. She complained to the estate lawyer that her late husband was trying to make her a felon, just to annoy his old golf rivals one last time. She was terrified, but wanted that beach house desperately. 6. Marital bliss came to a screeching halt at a reading in Texas when a grieving widow found out her husband of 20 years left his vintage car collection to his first wife. His reasoning was that the first wife actually helped him build the engines, while the current wife hated the smell of oil. The widow filed a screaming complaint right there in the office, demanding the cars be crushed into cubes rather than handed over to her rival. Do you think the dead husband made a fair call there? 7. Some people just want to watch the world burn after they leave it. An eccentric uncle left his nephews a beautifully drawn treasure map instead of a direct payout, promising millions buried in the desert. The nephews spent 3 weeks renting excavators and sweating under the sun, only to find a buried cooler containing a note that said the real treasure was the hard work they finally did for once in their lives. They tried to sue the estate for labor costs out of pure frustration. 8. Getting $250,000 sounds fantastic until you read the fine print. A wildly successful but incredibly narcissistic aunt left her entire fortune to her nephew, provided he legally changed his first and last name to match hers. He complained bitterly to everyone who would listen that he was a grown man, with a career, who could not suddenly start calling himself Mildred Higgins. He held out for 3 months before giving up his dignity, taking the cash, and becoming Mildred. 9. Imagine fighting a ghost for your inheritance. A furious family discovered their patriarch left a massive chunk of his estate to a caretaker fund specifically designed to maintain an empty Victorian house for the spirits that supposedly lived there. The family filed a ridiculous complaint asserting that ghosts do not have social security numbers and therefore cannot be beneficiaries. The trust was legally ironclad, meaning the invisible roommates had better job security than the living heirs. 10. Nothing says family love like posthumous blackmail. A wealthy matriarch put a chokehold on her grandson's inheritance by stipulating he would only see a dime if he married a woman who had a master's degree in accounting and knew how to play the cello. He filed an angry complaint with the estate executor, arguing that his grandmother was trying to run his dating life from the cemetery. Seriously, how much money would it take for you to marry a complete stranger just to satisfy a will? 11. A die-hard Chicago Bears fan left his massive estate to his beloved but traitorous Green Bay Packer fan of a grandson. The catch was brutal. To get the money, the grandson had to get a giant permanent Bears logo tattooed on his chest. The grandson complained to the probate judge that this was physical assault by a dead guy. The judge just laughed and said he better start looking for a good tattoo artist. Would you permanently brand yourself with your rival team for a cool million? 12. A brutally honest grandmother used her last will to play ultimate matchmaker. She offered her grandson a life-changing trust fund, but only if he immediately broke up with his current girlfriend, whom the grandmother absolutely despised. The grandson filed a deeply emotional complaint with the estate attorney, saying it was basically emotional blackmail from the grave. He ended up taking the money and getting dumped anyway, proving grandmas always have the last laugh. 13. Imagine choosing between Instagram and your inheritance. A tech-hating grandfather left his influencer granddaughter a life-changing sum of money on the strict condition that she permanently delete all her social media accounts and use a basic flip phone for 3 full years. She filed a bizarre grievance claiming that separating her from her followers was a violation of her human rights. The estate executor simply handed her a cheap plastic phone and told her the clock was ticking. 14. Divorce bitterness can definitely outlive the actual people involved. A woman who died peacefully in her sleep left a beautifully wrapped mahogany box to her ex-husband. When he opened it expecting cash or a sentimental heirloom, he found the burnt ashes of the expensive leather recliner he had begged to keep during their messy split 20 years prior. He angrily complained to the estate lawyer that he was billed a massive delivery fee just to receive a box of premium roasted furniture. 15. It is a classic trope, but it actually happens and the complaints are legendary. A wealthy businessman completely bypassed his 3 Ivy League-educated children and left his entire $3 million estate to a diner waitress who always remembered his exact coffee order. The furious kids filed a massive lawsuit, complaining she must have used black magic or illegal substances in his scrambled eggs. What would you do if a waitress serving pancakes got your entire family fortune? 16. Imagine inheriting a massive, fully paid-off suburban home, but it comes with 75 terrifying roommates. A quirky mother left her estate to her son with one ironclad condition. He had to keep her massive, extremely creepy porcelain doll collection displayed in the master bedroom. The son filed a desperate complaint with the probate court, arguing the dolls were causing him severe insomnia because their glass eyes followed him in the dark. The judge showed zero sympathy, meaning this grown man had to sleep surrounded by tiny Victorian ghosts just to keep his own house. 17. Forget about Rolex watches and diamond rings. 2 adult sisters nearly destroyed their local courthouse fighting over a wooden spoon and a heavily charred grilling spatula. The items were absolutely worthless, but their late father used them at every single 4th of July barbecue. One sister filed a police report claiming the other broke into her garage just to kidnap the spatula. The local police chief actually had to issue a warning telling them to stop calling the cops over kitchen utensils. 18. You might expect legal battles over mansions or stock portfolios, but a family in Ohio completely dismantled their relationship over 30-year-old plastic containers. 2 middle-aged brothers spent thousands of dollars on attorney fees fighting over who got their late mother collection of stained vintage Tupperware. One brother filed a formal complaint claiming the other had stolen the sacred matching lids. They blew half the actual cash inheritance just fighting over plastic bowls. 19. Inheritance drama reached a new low when a man left his luxury condo to his niece, but left the actual front door of the condo to his nephew. The nephew was legally allowed to paint the door whatever color he wanted and could deny entry if he felt petty. The niece filed a frantic complaint with the condo association, begging them to intervene because her brother painted her door neon pink and installed 7 different deadbolts. She had to climb through a fire escape for a month. 20. A hardcore vegan aunt left her massive stock portfolio to her barbecue-loving nephew, but only if he swore off meat for 5 entire years. She even hired a private investigator from her estate funds to periodically check his household trash for rib bones. The nephew filed a furious complaint with the executor after the investigator tackled a pizza delivery guy in his driveway to inspect the toppings. He eventually gave up the money just so he could eat a pepperoni slice in absolute peace. 21. Grandmas always leave recipes, but one fiercely competitive baker left her famous chocolate chip cookie recipe to her daughter with the secret ingredient permanently blacked out. The daughter actually called the estate attorney in absolute tears, complaining that her mother took the vanilla extract ratio to the grave just to ruin her future holiday bake sales. She even accused her sister of stealing the real copy. Would you hire a private investigator over a cookie recipe? 22. Sometimes an inheritance is a literal curse. A man inherited his grandfather's prized possession, a 30-year-old African gray parrot. The major problem was that the bird cursed like a sailor and aggressively mimicked the exact sound of a blaring smoke detector at 3 in the morning. The exhausted grandson filed a hilarious complaint with local animal control, begging them to arrest the bird for disturbing the peace because his wife threatened to leave him over a feathered roommate. 23. A devoted daughter was deeply moved when she was exclusively entrusted with her late mother, beloved indoor fern. The official will specifically requested she water it every single Sunday without fail. 3 entire years into this emotional weekend ritual, the daughter accidentally dropped the pot and realized the plant was entirely made of plastic. She furiously complained to her siblings that she had been beautifully manipulated into watering a piece of green rubber for 1,000 days. 24. 2 grown brothers went to literal war over a terribly stuffed, cross-eyed squirrel their father kept sitting on his garage workbench. Neither of them actually wanted the creepy thing in their house, but both were absolutely terrified that conceding the squirrel meant losing their masculine pride. One brother filed a formal complaint with their mediator, demanding the squirrel be split completely down the middle with a table saw. The lawyer had to draw up shared custody for a dead rodent. 25. You think dividing assets is hard? Try dividing 2,000 unmarked VHS tapes. An eccentric uncle left his massive collection of home-recorded television broadcasts to his niece. She complained bitterly to the garbage company when they refused to take the mountain of plastic in one trip. She spent 3 full weekends hauling boxes of old soap operas and weather reports to the dump, loudly cursing her uncle for turning his living room hoard into her personal weekend nightmare. 26. Fighting over jewelry makes sense, but fighting over an intensely ugly, moth-eaten Christmas sweater is just pure spite. 3 adult sisters nearly got into a fistfight at the probate office because their mother mandated the sweater go to the daughter who visited the most. One sister filed a written grievance claiming another sister secretly faked her sign in times at the nursing home just to secure a hideous acrylic garment. Would you destroy your family over a bad holiday outfit? 27. A local bowling league champion left his prized, heavily worn bowling shoes to his son-in-law, purely as an insult. The son-in-law hated bowling and had extremely large feet, meaning the foul-smelling shoes were entirely useless to him. He was so incredibly offended by the subtle jab that he tried to reject the item legally, complaining to the court that forced acceptance of biological hazards should be against the law. He ended up leaving them in a random dumpster behind a diner. 28. A petty grandfather passed away and left his grandson the ultimate chore. He prepaid a 10-year subscription to a magazine he absolutely hated, just so his grandson would have to walk to the mailbox and throw it away every single month. The grandson lodged an angry complaint with the publishing company, begging them to cancel the delivery. The company refused because the account was locked by the deceased. The old man successfully annoyed his family from beyond the grave for a decade. 29. A mother left a beautifully locked chest to her youngest son. He thought it contained gold or rare coins. Instead, it contained all of his deeply embarrassing middle school diaries that she had secretly fished out of the trash decades ago. He filed a dramatic complaint with his therapist, arguing his mother achieved the ultimate posthumous troll job. He had to spend an entire afternoon burning the evidence of his awkward teenage poetry before his own wife could find the key. 30. An uncle left his nephew a quote-unquote classic watercraft. When the nephew drove 4 hours to claim his prize, he found a completely rotted wooden canoe resting at the bottom of a murky pond. He filed a loud complaint with the local county office, outraged that he inherited the legal responsibility to pay a junk removal service $500 to dredge a swamp. He argued that inheriting trash should be a crime. Have you ever been gifted something that actually cost you money? 31. A wealthy uncle left his nephew $50,000 with one incredibly public catch. The nephew had to rock a greasy, shoulder-length mullet for a solid year before seeing a single dime. The young man filed a desperate complaint with the estate executor, arguing that keeping a corporate job with an 80s rock star haircut was professional suicide. He eventually caved, bought a lot of hairspray, and endured 12 months of sheer mockery. Would you ruin your social life for 50 grand? 32. Imagine expecting a hidden safety deposit box filled with gold, only to find 3 heavy trash bags full of losing lottery scratchers. A delusional father left these to his son, claiming they were a monument to almost winning big. The son bitterly complained to the probate lawyer that he was essentially gifted 500 pounds of glossy garbage. He literally had to pay a recycling center to take his inheritance. Inheriting thousands of physical failures is the ultimate final insult. 33. A massive beachfront property was left to a city-loving daughter, but there was a huge geographical catch. She could only claim the deed if she lived in a remote, freezing cabin in Alaska for 2 consecutive winters. She filed an angry grievance claiming her father was punishing her for never going ice fishing with him as a teenager. She tried to hire a body double to live in the cabin, but the lawyer demanded weekly video calls. She abandoned the beach house to stay warm. 34. Families will fight over literal garbage if they think it holds sentimental value. 2 middle-aged sisters spent a fortune in legal fees battling over a half-empty bottle of extremely cheap grocery store ketchup. Their late mother used it at their final family barbecue, and both sisters claimed it was a sacred artifact. A frustrated judge finally received a formal complaint from one sister and ordered the bottle thrown away, threatening to hold them both in contempt of court over a condiment. 35. Getting $500,000 sounds like a dream until you realize it weighs thousands of pounds. A spiteful grandfather left his estate to his ungrateful children, but legally mandated the entire sum be delivered exclusively in unrolled pennies. The siblings filed a frantic complaint with the bank manager, completely outraged that 2 armored dump trucks were backing into their driveways. They had to rent heavy machinery and warehouse space just to sort out their massive copper-colored fortune. 36. A young man thought he hit the absolute jackpot when his reclusive aunt left him the keys to 5 large storage units. He rushed over expecting antique furniture or classic cars, only to find 300 naked retail mannequins staring back at him. He furiously complained to the facility manager that he was tricked into becoming the owner of a terrifying plastic army. The manager just handed him the monthly rental bill. Have you ever inherited a massive bill disguised as a precious gift? 37. Siblings are usually thrilled to inherit art, but not when it is a giant, terrifying velvet painting of crying clowns. A wealthy mother mandated that whoever wanted their cut of her liquid assets had to prominently display this horrific artwork in their main living room for 10 solid years. The siblings filed complaints accusing each other of secretly trying to destroy it so nobody would have to look at it. They even tried paying the lawyer to accidentally burn it in an office fire. 38. A wealthy farmer left his sprawling estate to his city-dwelling niece, heavily attaching one bizarre living condition. She had to personally care for his beloved, constantly screaming, fainting goat named Barnaby. She filed a loud noise complaint with her own local homeowners association after bringing the goat to her suburban backyard, completely terrified every time the animal locked up and fell over. She had to buy Barnaby his own expensive soundproof shed just to keep the property. 39. Sports fans take their season tickets incredibly seriously, even in death. A father left his 3 premium stadium seats to his 3 sons, but specifically gave the awful middle seat to the son who rarely visited. This son lodged a furious complaint with the ticketing office, demanding an upgrade because his brothers refused to let him use the armrests. The stadium staff had to step in to stop a physical brawl during the 3rd quarter. He inherited prime tickets just to be legally squished. 40. Imagine getting a hefty inheritance, but you are never allowed to sleep in again. A notoriously early rising father left his daughter a huge payout, provided she called the estate executor every single morning at 5 sharp for 2 years. She complained bitterly to the lawyer that her dad was micromanaging her deep sleep from the afterlife. She missed the call twice in the 1st month and almost lost 50 grand. Would you completely ruin your sleep schedule for a pile of cash? 41. A tech millionaire decided to turn his death into an escape room by leaving his entire fortune in a digital wallet. The massive catch was that his 3 children had to find the password hidden somewhere inside his terrible, self-published fantasy novel. The siblings filed a deeply frustrated complaint with the estate lawyer, arguing that forcing them to read 600 pages of awful elven poetry was psychological torture. They spent 2 entire months deciphering bad metaphors just to pay their mortgages. Would you read the worst book ever written to become a millionaire? 42. A spiteful matriarch left her beautiful, fully furnished mountain cabin to her oldest son, but attached a legally binding clause that he absolutely had to host his deeply obnoxious cousins for a full week every single Thanksgiving. The son furiously complained to the local county judge that his mother was actively using prime real estate to enforce toxic family gatherings from the afterlife. The judge firmly upheld the bizarre ruling, meaning this grown man literally had to endure 7 agonizing days of screaming arguments over dry turkey just to keep his own vacation home. 43. Inheriting priceless antiques sounds incredibly glamorous until you read the fine print of a highly vindictive will. A wealthy aunt left a massive, custom-built mahogany dining table to her niece, whom she secretly despised. However, she strictly ordered the estate executor to saw off one single wooden leg before delivery. The deeply confused niece filed a screaming complaint with the moving company, accusing them of vandalizing her inheritance. She later found out her aunt intentionally gave her useless, wobbly furniture just to deliver one final, brilliantly petty insult from the afterlife. 44. A father who was absolutely sick of his 2 warring daughters refusing to speak to each other decided to force their hands. He left them a combined $200,000, but locked it entirely in a joint bank account that legally required both of their physical signatures for every single withdrawal. One daughter lodged a highly emotional complaint with the bank manager, claiming her father was holding her hostage with a biological rival. They actually had to sit in the same room and awkwardly share a pen just to buy groceries. 45. Families often struggle with what to do with cremated remains, but one eccentric bowling champion made his final wishes undeniably clear. He legally mandated that his ashes be professionally mixed into the resin of a custom bowling ball, which was then gifted to his squeamish grandson. The terrified grandson filed an immediate complaint with the mortuary, arguing that he did not want to aggressively hurl his grandfather down a greasy wooden alley every Thursday night. He ultimately kept the ball locked in a closet to avoid accidentally throwing a gutter ball with his actual relative. 46. You might think sibling rivalry ends at the reading of the will, but 2 grown brothers spent thousands of dollars fighting over a half-empty bottle of cheap drugstore cologne. Their late father wore it to every single Little League game, making it intensely sentimental. One brother filed a formal grievance with the probate court, accusing the other of secretly spraying the remaining liquid just to reduce his eventual inheritance. The judge practically yelled at them to go buy a new bottle instead of wasting the absolute limits of the legal system. 47. A lonely billionaire left a massive, life-changing trust fund to his youngest nephew, but the money remained totally frozen until the young man legally adopted a highly aggressive senior rescue cat named Mr. White. The nephew desperately complained to the local animal shelter that the feral cat was actively destroying his expensive leather furniture and aggressively attacking his friends. The shelter absolutely refused to take the animal back without permanently voiding the entire inheritance. How many deep scratches would you willingly endure every single day just to secure a massive financial future? 48. Inheriting property is usually a massive blessing, unless that property includes a fully functional, historically accurate medieval catapult sitting in the front yard. A history-obsessed uncle left his suburban home to his niece, but strictly forbade her from moving the giant wooden siege weapon. She filed an angry complaint with the city zoning board after her homeowner association threatened to heavily fine her for displaying ancient artillery. She had to hire a specialized historical lawyer just to prove the massive weapon was a legally protected family heirloom. 49. A strict, health-conscious grandfather decided to aggressively micromanage his grandson from beyond the grave. He left the young man an incredibly valuable underground wine cellar, but the will explicitly stated the grandson had to join a local temperance league and pass random breathalyzer tests for a full year. The furious heir filed a massive complaint with the estate attorney, arguing it was wildly hypocritical to gift rare alcohol while simultaneously banning him from actually drinking it. He essentially became the sober guardian of a $1 million party he could not attend. 50. A retired Broadway actor left his sprawling penthouse apartment to his extremely shy accountant of a daughter. The major catch was that she had to publicly perform a full tap dance routine in the lobby of the building in front of all the residents to claim the actual deed. She filed a wildly panicked complaint with the building manager, begging him to clear the lobby so she could dance in absolute peace. The manager refused, forcing a painfully introverted woman to put on tap shoes and awkwardly shuffle for real estate. Would you completely embarrass yourself in public for a luxury penthouse? 51. Inheriting a massive sum of money is a dream, but inheriting an absolute nightmare of a vehicle is a reality check. A wealthy but deeply frugal grandfather left his beloved, brightly painted ice cream truck to his teenage grandson, strictly demanding he drive it to his high school prom instead of a rented limousine. The humiliated grandson filed a furious complaint with his parents, begging them to override the will. He had to slowly roll up to the biggest night of his life, aggressively blasting cheerful nursery rhymes while everyone stared. 52. A notoriously messy aunt left her pristine, $1 million suburban home to her famously germophobic niece. The catch was absolutely diabolical and deeply personal. To secure the deed, the niece had to personally deep clean the entire house using only a toothbrush and heavily diluted vinegar, with zero outside professional help allowed. The exhausted niece filed a frantic complaint with the estate executor after spending 3 consecutive weeks scrubbing a single bathroom, realizing her aunt was laughing hysterically from the great beyond at her absolute misery. 53. Family heirlooms are usually beautiful jewelry or vintage watches, but one incredibly stubborn father left his 2 sons a single, heavily rusted set of jumper cables. He famously used them to revive every broken-down car they ever owned growing up. The brothers furiously complained to the probate judge that they spent $5,000 in legal fees arguing over a piece of absolute junk worth maybe $20. The judge completely lost his patience and threatened to literally cut the cables in half right there in the courtroom. 54. A highly successful but incredibly eccentric author left his unpublished manuscript and a massive trust fund to his daughter. The catch was she had to legally change her first name to the deeply embarrassing name of his main protagonist, Princess Sparkletoes. The daughter filed a massively tearful grievance with the estate attorney, arguing she was a respected corporate executive who could not possibly sign multi-million-dollar contracts with a fairy tale name. She eventually abandoned her dignity, took the cash, and became a very wealthy princess. Would you permanently change your name to something ridiculous for a fortune? 55. Imagine being handed a literal treasure map instead of a simple bank transfer. A completely unhinged uncle left his entire life savings buried somewhere in the vast Nevada desert, giving his 3 nephews only a series of incredibly cryptic riddles to find it. The exhausted nephews filed a furious complaint with the local sheriff office after spending 2 grueling weeks digging massive holes in the scorching heat, completely convinced their uncle just wanted them to suffer one last time. They actually found the buried cooler, but it was completely empty except for a note saying, "Gotcha." So there you have 55 absolute disasters masquerading as inheritances. People will fight over millions. They will fight over a rusted spatula. And they will absolutely lose their dignity just to prove a point to a dead relative. Which of these completely unhinged inheritance conditions was the absolute worst? And more importantly, how much money would it take for you to publicly humiliate yourself for a payout? Let me know exactly what you would do down in the comments. Hit that like button. If you are grateful your family is only moderately crazy, and subscribe for more absolute absurdity.